Division of decimals by decimals. Let's look how we can be successful. So number 1 says, if the divisor has a decimal, which is the number on the outside, move it to the right until it becomes a whole number. Move the decimal in the dividend the same number of places as the divisor, which I'll demonstrate here after I read through these. Number 2 says we need to make an estimate. You may use the original number or the adjusted number. So again, looking at our problem up here, we have 12 and 84 hundredths divided by 6 and 42 hundredths. You could use that math problem, or once we adjust and move our decimals, you could estimate using those numbers. Then number 3, we can divide, ignoring the decimal in the dividend if there still is one. And then number 4, we come back in and we place the decimal in the quotient using our estimate, which sometimes may or may not be necessary, depends on the question. So let me show what I mean here. So number 1, we look and we see that we have 6 and 42 hundredths. Well, that would be our decimal, and that we don't want that. So we need to get rid of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to move it to the right 2 places to get rid of it. Well, anything you do to the divisor, we will need to do to the dividend. So we'll need to hop that 2 places. So let me demonstrate. So this would come over here, and then we need to adjust our dividend. So really our new problem becomes, we don't even have a decimal anymore. So we can rewrite it, and we get now 1,284 divided by 642. So let's work through some problems together, following those steps to be successful, and see if we can make sense of these rules. So first, we're going to start with our question here. We have 46 and 8 tenths divided by 5 and 2 tenths. So we can adjust it up here. Since my divisor here has a decimal, we are going to need to move that to the right. Well, when we move that to the right, we will also need to adjust it in the dividend. Kind of like being fair. I've used that term with fractions. Whatever you do to the top, you need to do to the bottom. It's the same idea with the divisor and the dividend. Now, since I already rewrote my problem, I will need to adjust. So my 5.2 becomes 52, and my 46.8 will become 468. Which this works out nicely because now we don't have any decimals, so this really becomes a basic division problem here. But first, we need to make our estimate. So I'm looking here at 46 and 8 tenths. That's basically 50. Divided by 5 and 2 tenths, if we call that 5, this is telling me my answer should be somewhere around 10. So now let's use that. If I do 5 and 2 tenths times 10, I'm going to kind of make some notes over here on the side. 5.2 times 10, it's going to hop my decimal 1 over, and that gives me 52, which unfortunately is a little too high. But I can use this to work backwards and try to figure out what my first partial quotient will be. So if I take my 52 and I subtract 5.2, which would be my way of figuring out what 5 and 2 tenths would equal. Now we get to do some borrowing here. This becomes a 1, this becomes a 10. Borrow ahead of time. There we go. That would be an example of the trade first method. And then we take 10 minus 2 is 8. Bring down my decimal point. 11 minus 5 is 6. And 4 minus nothing is 4. And look at that. It looks like we have a winner here. We have 468. So that worked out really nicely. So if I put a 9 out here for my partial quotient, I know that 9 times 52 will give me 468. So now I have this 9, and we need to look at it. Is it going to be 9, or do I need to move my decimal point around? Based on my estimate, 9 is where we're at. If you would like, you could add a 0.0, but everything looks good, and we just successfully completed a first division problem together. we need to move the decimal out of our divisor 1, 2 hops to the right, and we need to do the same in our dividend, so nothing changes. So I went ahead and rewrote our problem, and now it looks like it's 120.9, or 120 and 9/10 divided by 31. Now again though, remember we're just going to ignore this decimal, and we're going to come back in later and put it in our question using our estimate. So 31 does not go into 1, it will not go into 12, it almost goes into 124 times, but that's a little big, so we'll have to start with a 3. 3 times 31 is 93. But it looks like we are going to need to add a 0 for that 9, which means we'll have to add a 0 to our partial quotient as well. Now it looks like it's time to do some subtraction and some borrowing. And we get 279. All right, my estimate, I'm thinking my 31 is pretty close to 30, and I see 27 there, and I know that 3 times 9 is 27, so kind of guessing and checking here to see if it can go in 9 times. Let's try that out. So 31 times 9. And look at that, it does perfectly work for us. Our next partial quotient will be a 9, which gives us exactly what we needed. We put our answer together, and we get 39. Now this is where we need to refer back to our estimate. We said our estimate, it should be around 4, so we need to put that decimal in, and we get 3 and 9/10. And now it's your turn. I would like you to try for me 2 and 8/100 divided by 1 and 6/10, and find that answer for me. Please be sure to estimate and make sure that you show all of your work. Good luck, and as always, I hope this helped.